Hi, I'm Dr. Nancy Crupi. I'm a biologist with 15 years of academic research experience internationally, and I've been working on a lot of different things, and ultimately I have also had to overcome a lot of personal challenges. I'm here to guide you towards awakening and ego death. Ego death and trauma healing are the most important tasks we need to accomplish today for humanity. The second season of the New Earth podcast is going to be specifically focused on giving you stories so that you see the trails and what kind of breadcrumbs you need to follow for you to reach your own ego death, for you to reach your own trauma healing, and for you to embody your highest self finally. Let's start. Hello, everyone, and welcome again to a new episode of the New Earth podcast. As you can see, we're in a different setting today. We are at Zula Den, and he's Eldad Alfi, and he's the owner of this incredible place. He's hosting so many incredible healing events. And you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Eldad Alfi. I'm the co-founder here of the Zula Den. And this is a space that we created. Basically, we wanted a space to commune. We wanted to create a safe space for people to be able to come together and have different experiences in physical proximity to each other. We don't believe that social media is true connection, and we created this space in order for people to have a place to gather. So what we do here on the daily basis is we host things like sound baths, guided meditations, breath work, yoga, and musical journeys with full live band here on the stage behind us. So those are the kinds of things that we like to bring to just create these environments where people can relax, let go of their day-to-day stress, and maybe make a new friend and feel like they have a community. Because for me, I just feel like that's a very important part for a happy life, is to feel like you have family in the place where you live.
And for longevity, these things are also fundamental for a healthy lifestyle. Like, we are constantly bombarded with messages of going to the doctor whenever we feel sick, but reality is that these are the real medicine, these kind of things are the real medicine and the real way of healing towards longevity and really healthful life. So yes, I love this place, and you guys checked it out at zuladen.org. And this place is huge. This is just a small part of it. He hosts a lot of different kinds of events and music, concerts, and yeah. Do you want to add anything else?
No, thank you for coming. Thanks for doing the podcast here in this space, and we'd love to have you guys come by, check it out. We have a full calendar on the website, so you can look through it, read through the descriptions, and see what really calls you the most. When you read something that is like, wow, that's interesting, and you can't stop and you think about it, that's probably the one for you. So check it out and see what you feel called to come try out here.
And you're going to have an event on the 15th, 14th?
Yeah, on February 15th, we're going to have the soiree, which is our quarterly event that's completely free. It's a 6-hour event from 12 to 6 p.m., and it's a free sample day. It's a full wellness day with a dozen different rooms simultaneously, having scheduling for all the 6 hours with one-on-one group sessions, everything, including ice baths, food, drinks. There's going to be a beautiful day to get together and mingle, and also soak up different experiences and try different modalities that you might not feel comfortable committing to a full 2-hour experience when you're never tried breath work, for example. This is your chance in the quarterly soirees to come and do a 15-minute session one-on-one with someone in one of our teepees or domes, and see if that's a modality that works on you and touches you. And if not, you try a different one. There's going to be over 15 different modalities offered in one day by 45 different facilitators. And everything is free. It's free to get in, and everything inside is free as well. So come by and check it out and see what you enjoy.
At what time?
It's from 12 to 6.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad this episode is going to air in a couple of days. So
Perfect.
You're perfectly
if
on
you guys
time.
are in Los Angeles.
Absolutely. Please come by. I'm going to be here too. So yes, come by and check it out. And thank you so much, Eldad, for allowing us to host this podcast here. And thank you guys, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Let's make it happen together.
Hello, everyone, and welcome again to a new episode of the New Earth podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about what's your purpose. And I know this sounds like a huge topic, but everything is really way simpler than what we think. And as you can see today, we're at Zula Den, and we're starting this partnership with Eldad, as you probably listen to in the intro. And this is an incredible place. Come and check it out. Come in on the 15th to check out the kind of events they organize and the kind of healers that come and organize these things and offer their classes here as part of this community. This is an incredible place. So first of all, today we are going to be talking about what's your purpose. And I feel like we all have this very polarized way of thinking about the world, or like black and white, good and bad. And I also use these terms all the time, these words all the time in the podcast. But there's really not such thing as good and bad, other than when things become cancerogenic, in a sense, become bad for the system, become unsustainable, become things that need to be rebalanced. In that sense, there is some sort of bad, in the sense that it's unsustainable, and so something else, the universe is like an equation, and so when something gets unbalanced on one side, then something else needs to be rebalanced on the other side, and that causes a lot of pain and suffering. And at the same time, yes, pain, it's a great catalyzer for awakening from the ego, from this reality in which we see things as just a part of the whole, instead of having the big picture that allows us to see, oh yeah, okay, this person is doing this because that's their purpose, that's their function in the universe. And I'm doing this because that's my purpose, that's my function in the universe. And naturally, we are just repulsed or attracted to each other, or we cause pain to each other, or we fight against each other, because in the bigger picture, we have these opposite roles. And I always like to give this example of the body, because everything is just an upscaling of things, and so as much as the cells work in a way, then the body is just the upscaling of how the cell works, and then the body works in a certain way, and then humanity is an upscaling of the body. And so it works like the body, but just where every one of us is, in a certain sense, a cell of the body, a portion of an organ, a portion of a system that we don't know we're part of. We're just part of it because we function in a certain way. It's like a pancreatic cell and a liver cell. They're different. They have different functions, they have different skills, and they have different purposes in the body, but they don't know which, they don't know, I'm a pancreatic cell or I'm a cell of the liver. They don't really know that. So what they do is they just are themselves, and by being themselves, they are ultimately having a purpose, a function for the body, and they are absolutely both of them. They're very fundamental for the body. And in the same way, in a vessel, imagine a vessel made of all of these cells that surround the vessel and create the walls of the vessel. And thanks to the fact that they're very attached to one another through junctions, and they're very tight, they create this vessel that ultimately doesn't allow any leaks, in a sense, other than for selected substances and selected circumstances in which things go through the vessels because they're supposed to go through. But otherwise, the vessels are a sort of barrier, because the blood has to go through them, and they have to be tight because the blood has to go through them. So this is important, even though if you're a cell that is part of the blood and is in the blood and is flowing in the vessel with the blood, stepping against this vessel feels like painful, because they're like a barrier. You're like, is this a barrier? I don't understand. But there is a purpose, right? You're not supposed to go through that unless you're supposed to go through that, right? And so whenever this happens, like that we find things that are barriers, it's also because there is a purpose for that, because we are being channeled by the universe towards what is actually meant for us, the place where we're actually meant to be. And so that's all normal. So all of these things happen also in humanity, but just we don't know that what system we belong to. And this is just because at this stage, humanity is still at an early stage, in a sense of conglomerate, in a sense. Not early stage, but it's at a stage in which we need to really become conscious, in the sense that humanity is working already, is functioning, is a body. But at the same time, humanity, like the humans that are part of it, as much as the cells of our body, we don't know who we are. We don't know what our purpose is. And also, we receive a lot of egoic messages from our systems that don't allow us to actually understand who we are, and instead mislead us and make us believe that we have certain purposes that we don't actually have. And there is a reason for that, and I talked about it in the previous episode where I talked about the cancer, the pathology that is affecting humanity. And so that is the episode called Upscaling Humanity. You can check it out. And I talked about why all of this happens as well. So in the body, everything happens for a reason, but there are circumstances in which things that happen are not actually good for us. Ultimately, everything comes from the outside, in the sense that when we have an illness, a pathology, it's because something from the outside, it can be a chemical or it can be stress, is ultimately affecting our body negatively, and it's affecting our regular functions and make us drift from our well-being to develop illnesses, pathologies, and things like cancer, for example. So cancer is the only thing that really is, in a sense, bad for our system, because it represents a growth that is unsustainable, that is not meant for the body, for the well-being of the body, because all of our organs are supposed to grow and to flourish. But if the cancer grows and flourishes, that's not the body, that's something that sucks up energy and drains energy and resources from the body for its own good, without actually using those resources to do anything else other than growth. If you see a mass of a tumor, you can see that it's just a mass of stuff. It doesn't have organs, it doesn't have a function, it doesn't have eyes, it's just a mass of cells that forgot of being part of the body and tried to make something for themselves. And so that's bad, because it's unsustainable, because it gets to a point where the tumor cannot survive by itself. And so even if it kills the body that it arose from, ultimately also the tumor is going to die, because the tumor does not have all the different organs needed to survive. And so tumors are unsustainable. And in the same way, we also as a humanity can have tumors, can have a form of cancer. And that kind of cancer is whenever people start believing of being separate from humanity, of being different than anybody else, and of having grandiose goals. Like when people start believing that they have the privilege of being better than others, and of getting more things than others, and of accumulating and of growing more than the rest of the population, and by exploiting the population, that's when it's not good. That's when it becomes a cancer. And unfortunately, capitalistic societies like the United States are really the perfect environment for these tumors, because it's basically a system designed to allow an uncontrolled growth of corporations or individuals that want to exploit others. Here it's possible. You can exploit people, and the jurisdiction system allows that, and the political system allows that, and there are a lot of things put in place to allow the exploitation of the masses. And so this is really the tumorigenic environment, and unfortunately we need to change that, and we are changing that already. There are a lot of people going towards small businesses and trying to really invest in healers and in people who are really doing the best for the population, for the body we are part of, for humanity. And so we are in the way towards healing already, but all of this comes from not knowing what is our purpose, or not embodying our purpose, because also the tumorigenic cells in a body, they come from an organ where they had a function, they were part of the body. They suddenly decided, obviously they don't have a consciousness, or at least for what we know, they don't have a consciousness, but a cell, what they do is they mutate, and by mutating they start having goals and skills that are different than what they should, and they start creating something for themselves, which then becomes a cancer. And in humanity, it's the same. Like the people that create these sort of corporations or situations, or the people that ultimately grow uncontrollably by exploiting the masses, by defrauding the masses, do so because they also went through some sort of mutation, like psychologically speaking or genetically speaking. They also have for some reason forgotten about their purpose, because they do have a purpose. So imagine a vessel. So the reason why I talk about the vessel is because the vessel is an organ that the vessels are part of the circulatory system, and vessels are basically organs in the sense that they have their own identity and they have their own function. And the cells of these vessels are ultimately meant to be tighten with each other, to be attached to each other, and to form this very strong barrier so that the blood can go through. Now imagine for a second that suddenly a tumor creates vessels, because that's what tumors do. Tumors create vessels that ultimately are meant to attract all the resources from the body towards the tumor. So by doing so, the tumor is basically using a function that is part of the body, which is a cell that is naturally meant to create a barrier, but it uses it for negative reasons, for unsustainable purposes, for things that are not meant for the body, but they're meant for the tumor. But the function that it is using is the same. And so in humanity, there are people who also have this very strong capability of creating fraternities and Masonic organizations, or like whatever organization that is very tight and it becomes a barrier against others, and it's like, not transpassable in a sense. And so those are the vessels of humanity. Those people are the vessels of humanity. But now imagine that suddenly all these people, as much as a tumor creates the vessels to drain resources from the body and to bring them towards the tumor. Imagine that all these people, the same kind of people with the same kind of skills, instead of using their skills for the body, they use their skills for a corporation. That's not anymore their purpose, because they're applying their skills for things that they're not meant for everyone's good, but they're meant for the well-being of just a small portion of humanity, of human beings that are not humanity anymore. They became the tumor. And so this is important, because that's what we're seeing today. We're seeing a lot of people that have forgotten their function, and they're actually having a function that is unsustainable for humanity and is becoming toxic to us, because it's draining resources from us in ways that then the resources never come back to us. Corporations take, but they never give back. And so, but what is your purpose? What is our purpose? What is their purpose ultimately? And so our purpose is ultimately to be ourselves. And this is it sounds simple and very, very difficult at the same time, because it's like you're like, I've been myself my whole life. You have not. That's the thing, that we are oftentimes, since we are children, when we are children, we are born with already a skill set and things that we enjoy doing, things that we don't enjoy doing, people that we are attracted to, and people that we repulse, and people that we fight against. All of these things are already present when we are children. We already are made in a certain way as children already. But then we go to school, and unfortunately, this tumor has become so spread and has metastasized so much in society that now everything has basically been hijacked by this tumor that indoctrinates us to attract us towards corporations to become employees. And so everything has become a way to really make us have a purpose that is not for the body, but is meant for the well-being of just a small portion of humans. And so that's the problem. But since we are children, we already have our purpose. We just forget about it because of all the propaganda and all of the indoctrination and all of the things that we're told that are really very egoic ideas that don't allow us to find our real purpose. And that's why then we get to a point where we develop our brain and we finally realize, wait, what is going on? And we go through so much pain that then we awaken and we start developing consciousness. And once we develop consciousness, then we find our purpose and we find who we truly are. But that usually happens after 20, 30 years of age. To sometimes even after much later than that. It's all about also the kind of generation you're part of. And so this is just to say that we need to be ourselves. But how are we supposed to be ourselves? Because it's difficult to understand what it means to be ourselves. And the key to it, and I talk about it in this whole season, basically, it's to be joyful. It's really to be joyful. To be joyful and to be truthful to yourself. And once you're truthful to yourself and you're truthful about what makes you feel joy and not sadistic pleasure, I say it all the time, but joy. When you feel joyful, that's the moment in which you can actually finally be yourself. And so sometimes being joyful means, repulsing others or like not allowing them to trespass a certain barrier. And that makes you feel good because you feel like you're doing that for a bigger purpose. That's the whole point. You're doing that for the body. And that brings you joy because you're protecting something. And that brings you joy. But every one of us has different priorities and has different codes of honor, as different values. We all are different because we have different functions. And so what makes me joyful is different than what makes you joyful because we are different and we have different functions. And so you're supposed to be you. I'm supposed to be me. And what makes you joyful, it's ultimately the function you're supposed to have. And so for a liver cell, what makes the liver cell joyful is taking up a lot of very intoxicated blood and making it clear and cleansing it. And the liver feels joyful for that. If you do the same to a pancreatic cell, the cell is going to be, I don't want to do this. This job sucks. And so because the pancreatic cell does not have that function. The pancreatic cell has the function of checking up how much glucose there is in the body, in a sense, through various hormones and biomolecules that signals to the pancreas how much glucose there is. And based on that, the pancreatic cells have to produce as much insulin as the body needs. And so that's their function, and they're joyful for that. What is your joy come from? Where does your joy come from? This is the only thing you need to evaluate, and the only thing you need to actually find out is where what makes you joyful. What makes you joyful? So unfortunately, there are a lot of obstacles that prevent us from understanding, first of all, what makes us joyful, and that really drift us and make us go along other paths or other directions in life, that then we feel lost and we have to go back and to undo a lot of work and to redo things over and to cleanse and to purge and to grow and to change and to finally, after we cleanse and we detoxify, we finally find ourselves. We should prevent that with our children. We should try to prevent our children from having to go through all that we went through, all the propaganda, all the indoctrination, and allow them to just be themselves. And by be themselves, they have their own function. So what makes you joyful is ultimately, how do you find out, and what are the challenges for this? First of all, the main challenge is really this constant comparing ourselves to other people or to goals that are like reference models that can come from advertisement, from social media, from our surroundings, from our family, from our culture, from our government, from corporations trying to sell us things, from a healthcare system trying to sell us pills. So all of these people that have the purpose of just growing the tumor obviously try to drain us and to get resources from us. But in order for them to do that, they have to convince us of giving them things, of giving away our wealth or giving away our time or giving away our attention. And so the only way to do that is to convince us that that's what we're supposed to do. And so we grow up and we are constantly bombarded with all of these messages of what we're supposed to do, what life is supposed to look like, what kind of like house we're supposed to get, how we are supposed to dress up, how many times you should go to a bar. So all of these things are really have nothing to do with the actual function we have in the body. And as we grow older, then we find out that what our actual function is. Well, we tend to find it out only after we will go through all of this constant noise of functions and of things, which is also good because it allows us to explore. But at the same time, it will be fabulous to actually be able to avoid all of this and go straight, in a sense, and go straight in our lane and understand what our purpose is. So this is the very first challenge, the challenge of comparing two reference models that really try to tell us what we're supposed to do, which have nothing to do with the reality of our actual function in the body. Imagine again, the body, the cells of the body, if suddenly there is a virus and infects us and tries to give wrong messages to our cells and misleading messages to all of our cells about what they're supposed to do, they're going to believe it and they're going to start producing the virus and allowing the virus to spread instead of doing what they're supposed to do. And after a while, the body's going to die. And so this is what has happened to humanity, that we are being simply attacked by all of these ways, but people who are very egoic and who have forgotten of being part of the body and are trying to get things for themselves. But to do that, they have to manipulate us for us to cede our resources to them, to change our purpose in order to produce what they want to produce instead of to do what we're supposed to do for the body. And that's why humanity is so sick. You know, there's so many people who are homeless, there's so many people who are poor, there is a lot of war, there's so many people suffering. And how long are we gonna take to understand there's something going on that is not normal, you know, that there must be something going on that is really drifting, you know, deviating all of our resources and rechanneling our resources towards functions and places that are not meant for our well-being, are not meant for humanity. Because this is obvious, right? If the more you work in a company, the more the world gets sick, maybe that company is not doing anything good, right? And so it's important to understand that. But your purpose is to just be yourself and use your skills for everyone's well-being. That's your purpose. And so to do that, you need to have the values of being part of a body, of being part of a community, of being part of something bigger than you that you depend on, in a sense, and not depend on in a codependent kind of way, because the whole purpose, the whole way of being healthy is really to be independent. But by being independent, you also realize that you can be independent in a society in which everybody gives unconditionally and everybody receives unconditionally. So if you're part of a community that is healthy, you don't need to be codependent and to pretend to be a person that you're not. You can just be yourself, and by being yourself, everything works out and you obtain everything you need to have, the abundance you need to have for you to survive and thrive. And the same is for everybody else. And this is not a utopic world. This is how it's supposed to be. The utopic world is what we live in today. That is really, it looked like a utopia a long time ago, but they've been able to make it. You know, like they made it in the end. And so it's if if someone has been able to create the world that we have today that doesn't make any sense, then there must be a way of going back and of really recreating the society that we want and that we need to have. So the second challenge is really more than a challenge, is something that is a habit we should start having, which is being part of a community, being part of a club, being part of something bigger than ourselves, and start feeling that we are citizens of the world. We are children of the earth. We don't inhabit this planet. We are the planet. We have not been seated here. And even if we have been, still we are eating the planet, we are breathing the planet, we are interacting with the planet. We contain the same molecules that the rest of the planet contains. So we are the planet, even if we have been seeded here a long time ago. It doesn't matter. We still are right now this planet because we are fed by it. And so we are the earth. So once you understand that you are the earth. And so you cannot not empathize with everybody who is on this planet, with the plants, with the animals, with the people, you cannot not empathize with them because you are them. You're just a piece that has detached from the earth and now is walking around. But you have detached not because you're separate, but because if you have legs, you can have a certain function that a plant that doesn't have legs cannot have. And so we all have this function that as humans, we have legs, we have hands, we have a brain that is very developed, we have a mouth and a voice, we can speak, we have language, we can write ideas, we can spread ideas. This is something that is very unique in the animal kingdom. We are the only ones that write and give speeches like this and create art like we do. All these things are very unique in the animal kingdom. We have planes, we can fly from one place to another in the globe very quickly as compared to a horse. A horse cannot do that. And so this is what makes us unique as compared to all the other animals as humans. What is that makes you unique? How are you unique? And when I say that, I always mean in the context of humanity, not in the context of, not in any context, like always meaning as part of a community. And so that's why being part of a community of a network is so important. And a community that is unconditional, not a place where you go and fake of being a different person that you are for you to obtain something that ultimately is not for you. I mean a community in which you can be yourself, you can be unconditionally giving, and you are going to unconditionally obtain something back because you're enriched by being part of it, because people are generous, because people allow you to be part. And I feel like even if we, again, in the body there are all these different organs, right? And so if a cell that is not part of the vessels tries to be part of the vessels, it's not going to happen because that cell just doesn't know that it's not part of the vessels, it's not part of the circulatory system. And so it's just trying to become part of something that is ultimately not part of. And so we all are part of subgroups of organs in a sense, and so we all have our own function. And once we find people like us, like-minded individuals, and we can create community with them, and sometimes it's not people just like us in the sense that for example the circulatory system, the vessels of the body are everywhere, are necessary everywhere. And so there are certain kinds of people, or psychographics they're called. Psychographics are the psychological features of people instead of the demographics that are like their demographic information. The psychographics is how they function psychologically speaking. And so in every system, it's important that there are people who are, in a sense, capable of bonding with each other, and they're a little bit more reluctant to interact with others. Like imagine in a corporation, like I really like to give people the metaphor, the analogy with real things. So in a corporation, for example, have you noticed that oftentimes the call centers are made of a very specific kind of person. Like call center people tend to be very nice, very empathetic, but at the same time they have rules, and those rules are to be impermeable to whatever action of taking people have towards them. So if you go in a call center and you're like, hey, I have a complaint, your company has not, has advertised your product like this, but then when I tried to use it, it didn't actually work that way. So that's a potential complaint, right? So when you call a call center and you say something like that, the call center people have instructions that don't allow them to actually go through with that, because there's supposed to be a barrier, right? And so you see that is a function, that is a function that people have in order for the company to keep doing their thing. So this is just an example in the sense that is not a psychographic of people, but there are people who are really like that. There are people who really are in like their whole personality type. It's to be a barrier. Is to not allow you to go through with complaints, even if you're like, but this is I should do that, like this is just. But we're talking about corporations, right? Corporations are the tumor, so that's all the rules are inverted there. But if you look around yourself, you're going to see that there are a lot of people with different personality types. And even as you grow up, I'm sure, if you had siblings, you can see how even if you and your siblings have been raised by the same parents, you may have completely opposite psychographics and completely different ways and values and skills, and this is two different functions. You have two different functions, and oftentimes people that grow up together become the archetype that go against each other in life. Because imagine, as you and your little brother and your sister, you used to fight as kids, right? And then whenever you will do something wrong, your parents will come up and be like, who did it, right? And you will blame each other. And so because of all of these situations that happen all the time, then we develop ways of understanding when the other person is lying, for example. And so when we go out in the world, we become, in a sense, the meter that can understand when the other person is genuine and when it's not, when it's transparent or when it's not. So those are skills that ultimately act as a barrier against someone trespassing, someone doing something that is not supposed to do. So those are two different kinds of psychographics, two different kinds of functions, and we oftentimes don't understand it, and we tend to go against one another. But we all have our own function, because ultimately our purpose is to be ourselves, to be joyful and to be ourselves. But what happens if we are not? What happens if we are not aligned? What happens if we are not joyful? What happens if we are not truthful? What happens is that we trespass our lane. You see, like from a divine standpoint, we all have a lane, which is what we're supposed to do, the function we're supposed to have. And in that lane, we're protected, we're perfect. This is exactly what we're supposed to do. Like, again, in the body, as long as a certain cell has its own function and keeps doing its thing and it keeps being joyful, it also keeps being healthy and receiving abundance and receiving love and receiving warmth and receiving things from the rest of the body because it's having a function. But what happens if that cell oversteps? If that cell starts doing things that it's not supposed to do, that are beyond its own duties, beyond its own function, beyond its own skills, and it starts getting sadistic pleasure or pleasure into doing things that is not supposed to do, then what happens is that cell is trespassing its lane, and that's when the cell becomes toxic for the body, because it stops having its function and it starts trespassing into someone else's function. But the body has an immune system that is meant to patrol constantly, to check who is actually having its function and who is not. And when people trespass, then, there is always the patrolling cell that is there and be like, okay, you are labeled for destruction because you're not anymore having your function, you're becoming toxic. So this in humanity happens all the time. So what happens is that we all, if we have our function, we're fine. We get fed, we receive abundance, we receive things. If we stop having our function that we're supposed to have and we start trespassing, then we start having a lot of issues and we start interacting with people which ultimately have the function of stopping us from trespassing. So we all are, without knowing, the protectors of a certain lane. And as we grow up, we develop the skills and the psychographics needed for us to keep our lane and to make sure that our lane is clear from others. And then what happens is that if we go too much, if we develop grandiosity, if we start believing that we have more rights than others to achieve and to obtain and to gain, then we trespass our lane, and that's when things happen. That's when people are then attacked also legally and start lawsuits against them, or people start attacking them or smear campaigning them. When they trespass their lane, then the negative things start happening in the body because they're trespassing. And this is something that in humanity, as much as in the body, as much as at a universal level, trespassing is what you're not supposed to do. And trespassing can take a lot of different shapes. It can take the shape of being arrogant or of being too pushy when you're not supposed to, or it can take the shape of fraud. It can take the shape of defrauding or deceiving others in order for them to give you things that you're not supposed to get because that's too much, because you're taking too much and they're not taking enough. So whenever people trespass and go over their lane, that's when things start happening, and the universe starts having this cause and effect kind of reaction that causes them to pushes them down, pushes them back into their lane because they're becoming toxic. And so that's what creates the waves in the universe, this constant having to either you keep your lane, or if you don't, then that creates the cause and effect reaction that creates the waves and the counter waves of consciousness and pain, and consciousness and pain, and suffering and awakening and wars. And all of these things come from just one action, which is trespassing. We all have one purpose, which is to be joyful and to stay in our lane and to protect our lane and to make sure that we have the space and the time to have our function, because like in a spectrum of frequencies, the universe needs all of us to have our space and to have our lane. And we have to keep our lane clear. We have to make sure that once we find our function and we embody our function, we need to make sure that we are allowed to embody our function in the world. And that's why when people are pushed too much, then there are social revolutions and there are people who complain, there are people who file lawsuits, because that happens when someone trespasses their lane. And so they have to react, and they're built to react against them because they're trespassing their lane. And so this is going to lead all the time, every time that we go through wars or social revolutions or any kind of social manifestation, or any kind of really people starting to feel the need of going against something that is happening, is because someone is trespassing into their lane. And from a legal standpoint, it takes the shape of violation of human rights, violation of rights, And I feel like most people don't understand that nothing in the universe can happen other than things that follow the laws of the universe, because it's impossible. We are part of the universe. And so everything that happens in the universe it happens through the logic of the universe. And that's why psychic readers and tarot readers and all these things, these are real, because you cannot possibly make anything happen in the universe unless you're following the laws of the universe. However, if you do things fraudulently, then you're gonna have a reaction against you to push you back. And so again, these are like everything counterbalances itself in a sense, because the universe is designed like this to balance itself. But we all have to just be ourselves and have our function and have our purpose. And as long as we do that, we're fine. But how do we find our purpose in a world that tells us constantly that our purpose is something completely misleading, completely different. Like all of these ideas that we have, that we are given, are ultimately really not, are part of a wave that is now having a counter wave. So every time anything causes some sort of imbalance, or causes poverty, or causes a lack of, an imbalance that doesn't allow everybody to be healthy and wealthy at the same time, because the body works as long as everything is healthy and wealthy, and as soon as a part of your body starts feeling too weak, that's already the symptom that you're not well, that you're being in some way under stress, you're being attacked, you need to do something about it. So in humanity is the same. Like every time we see that something is not as healthy as it should be, such as homelessness. Homelessness is not normal. Why would people have to be so poor, so much suffering? This is not normal, right? And so when that happens, it's 100% sure that whomever is causing that, that's not the body, that's something external, or a tumor, or something that is causing a reaction, and that's the symptom of an illness already. So whomever is causing that, that's the illness we need to fight against. And so whenever these things happen, then the universe causes a reaction against that, and it's going to take time, and it takes time. It depends on the situation, on the population, on the culture, on the political time, but it takes time, but it happens. There is always a counter wave. So the more there are injustices, the more there is a counter wave, and it doesn't matter like when it is going to happen, because it's how the universe works. And even if people believe, no, but, I'm trying to create all of these walls made of call centers, like to not allow people to trespass, it's going to happen in a different way, through a different way, and it's going to break the wall anyways. So ultimately, everything follows the laws of the universe. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Even the law that we perceive as something very foreign sometimes. In fact, it's really basically a put in action, a put in writing of the laws of the universe, just in a different shape, in a different way, and it's all about, you see, like the law is designed to keep us in our lane, to keep everyone in their lane. And obviously there are always these loopholes, because the universe allows a certain degree of freedom that at the human level takes the shape of judges who are corrupt, or situations where people who pay, to obtain certain things, or people in the Congress that allow a certain law to be written in a way that allows loopholes. So all of these things are the degrees of freedom that the universe allows to its own laws, the vibration, like everything in the universe is not steady, it's vibrating, right? And because it's vibrating, then there is not one value that it can take. There are a bunch of values, that go around it on the left and the right, plus or minus 0, plus or minus 1. There is a certain degrees of freedom that is allowed, because the universe is not cold. The universe has a temperature right now that is high, and because it's high and is not cold, that means that it's vibrating. And when things vibrate, then there is not one allowed frequency, one allowed value. The frequency is a wave, right? Like the fact that we talk about frequency, that means that it's not one straight line. A frequency is something that oscillates between values. And so everything in the universe oscillates. And so all of these oscillations that we see, which are, things that we're like, this is not supposed to happen. This happens because the universe is vibrating. And so because it's vibrating, it's allowing certain values to exist, even if they're not truthful, even if they're not joyful, even if they're not fully peaceful, because of this vibration. And so ultimately the universe is going towards becoming colder again and becoming more peaceful. And we're seeing that already, that's why we have so many robots now coming up, because we are going towards cooling down all of these vibrations, all of these things that ultimately are causing a lot of war, because the more you vibe at a high temperature, the more you're also causing pain and causing suffering, causing negative things, in a sense, causing a cause that then you need a reaction to rebalance. The universe is not supposed to be like that. It's supposed to be more steady and peaceful in every possible kinds of way. But it takes time, and we all have ultimately the function of allowing the universe to get towards that, to keep these lanes, to keep these values, these vibrations, to reduce the vibration of the universe, so that the universe can become more peaceful, can become more of a straight line instead of all of these waves, And that doesn't mean stillness. That simply means staying in the truth, being aligned, recalibrating ourselves, refixing our, like the machine with the holes that I talk about in the first episodes, realigning the holes of all of the layers we are made of, so that we align with the inner light and we align with the source, and we become just vessels of the source and tools for the source to use to create the universe that we're supposed to create, and to stay healthy and to stay wealthy, and to make sure that everybody is healthy and wealthy at the same time. So our purpose ultimately is to be joyful, to be aligned, and to keep this lane, to keep this frequency, to safeguard this frequency, this function that we have, in order to make sure that we are allowed to have our function. And this doesn't mean that not everybody has the role of fighting against others in order to keep their lane. Just simply, we need to start saying no when people try to trespass, because we not only have the right to be ourselves, we have the duty to be ourselves. So it's totally normal to learn, and you see that today we are all learning how to put boundaries, to put healthy boundaries, how to say no to people, because that's part of the universe trying to reduce these degrees of freedom, and it's trying to really keep our lane and to teach us how to keep our lane from being trespassed by other people that ultimately are not supposed to do that. And this is because there are people who are more peaceful already, there are people who are more awakened already, and there are people who have a higher level of energy that allow them to vibrate in a larger way. And so to vibrate, to take a lot more values, to have a lot more values than what they should, and to trespass into other people's lanes in various ways. And they do that because ultimately this is the trauma of the Big Bang that travels in our universe. And so they do that because they have this energy to disperse. And to disperse that energy, they keep vibrating and hitting others and hitting the walls and trying to poke holes when they find a barrier, because they have the energy. Imagine this gas in this container, and every molecule of this gas is very heated up at very high temperatures. If you keep heating up the temperature and you don't allow an outlet to these molecules to disperse their energy, it's just going to explode. And so it's important to understand that there are people in the universe, in the earth, that have different functions, and there are people who simply have a higher level of energy than others, and because of that they keep trying to trespass all the time. But this is not good for the universe, because the universe is trying to go towards a place of away from trauma, towards ego death, towards awakening, towards peace. And to do that, the vibration needs to decrease to become to the bare minimum. The levels allowed, the values allowed need to become, the degrees of freedom need to decrease, so that we all have our own vibrational frequency. We embody that, and that's it, and this is what we need to do. But when people have too much energy to disperse, too much childhood trauma, for example, too much genetic and epigenetic trauma to disperse, they become the ones that then in a legal system we call criminals, in a jurisdiction system we call criminals. People who ultimately hurt others all the time because they are these crazy molecules that need to disperse all of this energy, and because they can't disperse all of this energy, they hit, and they need to be able to realign and to and to find a barrier that or an outlet to disperse all of this energy that they have. And this is why there are people, though, because everything again is a cause and effect. Then there is a whole immune system in the body, and there is a whole immune system humanity, like people like me, who ultimately I'm a political activist as well, and I also work on this to heal the world in a way that allows me to prevent others from trespassing and to keep my lane and to keep other people's lanes and to keep the lanes in a sense to protect them from being trespassed. This is really my function. For example, my function is a gatekeeper. I say it. I actually had this download. It was a divine word that I received, like the gatekeeper. The gatekeeper is like an immune cell basically that prevents people from trespassing into exploiting humanity. And I've done it a lot of times in my life. Like I really always constantly protect the population from people who are trying to exploit it. And that's because that's my function. That like brings me joy. And it brings me sadness not doing that. It makes me feel like I've lost my purpose. So I have to keep doing that. And that means that I have to do that. That's my function. That's my function, right? So everybody has a function. So what is your function? If you're truthful to yourself and you have to ask yourself, does this make me joyful or not? And start doing that with everything in your life, from food to interacting with people, to things you say, to kind of things that you watch, or to ideas, and start realizing what doesn't bring you joy. And sometimes, most of the times, because our system puts on us so many layers of lies and deception and propaganda and indoctrinations that we have to go through all of them, and it takes time. And so initially it's very confusing, because if you ask yourself what brings me joy, a lot of people are so far away from joy that they have no idea. They have to go through so many layers. And so for this, I suggest you, and we talked about a lot of different type of methods to also cleanse and to detoxify in the season 1 of this podcast. But there are a lot of ways of detoxifying and of allowing yourself to really cleanse. One of these ways is for sure going no contact with everybody, really, to isolate. Isolating is a great way of doing that. And we talked about that also with Tori. It's an interview that I'm going to be posting in a few weeks. And it's very important to isolate and to really isolate yourself from any possible source of indoctrination, of reference model, anything that makes you feel like, oh, I'm supposed to do that. This is what I'm supposed to do to be part of society, to be a decent human being, to be joyful. This is what's supposed to make me feel joyful. And instead it's not. It doesn't bring you joy. So first of all, going no contact is a great way of cleansing and detoxifying, and also from an epigenetic standpoint, not just psychological, because it just allows you to kind of reset your body and kind of get back to zero. So that's important. Not everybody can do that, though. Not everybody can go through a month of isolation, because it takes time. But if you can do that daily, every day. Every day you take 10 minutes a day to meditate and to really sit with yourself and figure out, get back to zero, get back to your own inner peace in some way, and try to do that, every day. And there is a lot, like we talked about the Vedic meditation, for example, the transcendental meditation with Tom Rossi in the second episode. There are a lot of ways in which you can really try and reach your peace 10 minutes per day, so that once you do that, you're recalibrating every day, you're recalibrating. And once you do that, then you can ask yourself, does this bring me joy or not? And sometimes, most of the times, we live lives that are so far away from what we're supposed to do that it's very difficult at the beginning. It's like we're surrounded by objects, by houses, by connections, by people, by TVs, by things that constantly tell us a different story, constantly give us a different narrative, a different idea of what we're supposed to enjoy. But that's not how it works. What I mean joyful, when I say joyful, I mean that you actually have to feel this inner feeling of joy. And some people have completely lost it, and maybe they've lost hope of being able to feel this joy, but it's there. You just have to reconnect with your truth. Your truth is what do I actually like to do or to not do. And so once you start going through these times in which you cleanse, in a sense, and these are some ways of psychologically and epigenetically cleansing. There is also a lot of plant medicine that allows people to purge and to cleanse, and I serve kambo, for example, and kambo is a great way of purging and really releasing things that don't serve you anymore, and that is one. Ayahuasca is another type of plant medicine that is absolutely incredible in terms of cleansing and purging away things that don't serve us anymore and to allow us to recalibrate these or others. Another thing that I do, for example, is the liver and gallbladder cleanses. That is an incredible tool because it allows you to reset your liver and your gallbladder in a lot of different ways, because we constantly accumulate liver stones and things that ultimately keep us stuck, because they also conserve the energy of the thoughts, of the things that we have kept for a long time there, and they keep us, the cells maintain the memory of all of the toxic things that we have ingested and all of the things that we do and so they keep us, our body becomes also prevent us from actually feeling joy, from actually realigning, because our body is made of physical cells, it's made of genetics, it's made of epigenetics, it's made of different levels of memory. And that memory is also about what we're supposed to do, has to do with reference models, with what we're supposed to look like. So our whole body is ultimately misaligned, because if we drink alcohol for 20 years and we don't need to, why would you need to drink alcohol? Like, it's nonsense. It's a habit. It doesn't make any sense. But if we do that for 20 years, then we're telling our body, this is okay. This is our reference model. Our reference model is someone who drinks alcohol every day. So once you try and ask your body, do I enjoy, does this drink bring me joy? Your body is going to think that it does, like, in a sense, it's like it's getting confused because that's what you gave it for a long time. And so the body can be a huge barrier for understanding what your purpose is. And you need to cleanse your body as well. Like, in the past 2 years, I became vegetarian. I started really, like, I haven't drunk in a year, any alcohol in a year. I've been sober. I don't like the idea, the word being sober, because it's not that I was an alcoholic before, but I used to drink alcohol like everybody else in bars and clubs in the weekend, and then I realized it doesn't make any sense. And as a psychic, I can't do that anymore, also because I realized that it really brings in a lot of spirits, a lot of energies, a lot of things that not only don't serve me, but it kind of creates channels. So we also don't realize that all of these things ultimately allows kind of like open portals to external energies to enter. And so once they do that, then it becomes more difficult for us to figure out what we like, because we are not alone. Like, there are other entities inside of us that we don't realize that we have. And so that's another level of not being clear-minded, of being confused. That's another level of being confused. Another way of cleansing and of really realigning with our purpose, and another barrier we need to overcome, is what is stored in our body in the form of contractions. That's why body work is so important, because in the form of contractions, we accumulate a lot of memories of things that happened to us, or reference models we think we need to embody, and ultimately we are very consistent. All the militaries or like law enforcement kind of people tend to have a certain posture, like keep a certain posture straight with the pec high. If you have that posture all the time, after a while you're going to become a military. You don't have to be at the beginning. You are going to become, because your body is consistent with someone who is ready to die for whomever is behind him, to protect whomever is behind him, is ready to be a barrier with his whole body, with his whole mind, for the life of whomever is protecting. So if you have a certain posture every day, if you're hunched all the time, or you're going to become insecure, because someone who is hunched is someone who is insecure. And so it's the same way when you ask someone who is insecure what makes you joyful, they're going to be insecure about it. So our whole body really has a lot of levels of lies, a lot of levels of barriers that don't allow us to be truthful to ourselves, that don't allow us to be to understand what makes us joyful. And so we need to cleanse in a lot of different ways in order for us to really find what makes us joyful. And part of it is going no contact from all the things that ultimately caused us to have certain postures or to have certain mindsets so the no contact part is so important. And that's why during the pandemic, for example, the fact that we all went no contact with our employers, for example, that has been a huge cleansing for humanity. And that's why afterwards now people don't want to go to do corporate jobs anymore, because they have finally cleansed epigenetically, psychologically. Their body has cleansed from the toxicity and from the toxic reference models of the tumor, and they're finally finding back their way towards the body of humanity. And that's why there are so many people now wanting to do more healing things, and that's the cause and reaction, right? So we need to cleanse first of all, and once we cleanse, and again, there's a lot of tools, and please contact me if you want to have a journey and to start this journey towards cleansing and embodying your purpose, because that's what I help people do. But if you want to finally embody your purpose and feel joyful and receive the abundance that you're supposed to receive, you really need to first cleanse and then start asking yourself, like a child, what makes me joyful? And you can do that with everything. It's gonna be very fun. You can do that with everything, from food. It's like, does this food really make me joyful or not? And this is not just about your what makes you joyful. What makes you joyful is part of your function. If you have the function of being a healer, for example, you're going to enjoy fruit, you're going to enjoy carbs, you're going to enjoy things that allow you to have a high level of serotonin, for example. You're going to enjoy things that allow you to develop your brain and your body in ways that are functional to your purpose in the body of humanity. And so what you enjoy is actually perfectly aligned with your purpose, because our body is our tool for our purpose. And so different bodies equate different purposes, different functions. We all have different heights, different weights, different body type, because we have different functions in the universe. We have different functions on the earth, we have different functions on humanity. So first of all, cleanse, then start asking yourself, what do I enjoy? What brings me joy? And it can be food, or it can be content you consume. If you feel really repulsed by certain things, or if you feel that certain things make you feel sad instead of making you feel joyful, that's not for you. Like, only things that make you feel joyful are for you, and you're meant to listen to those things to make you feel joyful or peaceful. Peaceful is ultimately the other side of joy, in the sense that when we're joyful, then we're also peaceful, because who will start a war or will start conflict if they're joyful? If you're joyful, you're inherently at inner peace, and if you're inner peace, you're also putting out in the world peace. You're vibrating at a frequency that allows you to really not vibrate too much and to be lesser energetic, in the sense of lesser traumatic for the world, and more peaceful, more of a straight line, to go towards the higher frequency. And higher frequencies, ultimately, this is like from a physical standpoint, lower frequencies and higher frequencies are also exactly that. For example, a lower frequency from a light standpoint is red. Red is a low frequency, and blue or ultraviolet light is high frequency. What is the frequency? The frequency is how often these particles oscillate. How often do they go up and down, right? How often? So the frequency, the more they do it, like 10 times per second, they have a certain frequency, which is 10 times per second. If they vibrate 2 times per second, then they're gonna have a lower frequency. But that doesn't mean that they vibrate less. That means that they have a lower frequency vibration. But usually particles that vibrate at a lower frequency are also larger, in a sense, larger waves. So the wavelength is larger when the frequency is shorter. And so because from one peak to the other, there is a longer time, and so the wave length is this big, right? It's like bigger for something that vibrates at a lower frequency, and is shorter for something that vibrates at a higher frequency. So ultimately, going towards higher frequencies means also having a shorter wavelength and having this more peaceful state that vibrates at a frequency that is capable of really being more aligned, instead of being all over the place, is more focused. And so the red light, for example, the infrared light, we use infrared light as a source of heat, because waves that vibrate at a lower frequency are actually very energetic, and so they release a lot of heat, right? And so ultimately we use infrared light because it releases a lot of heat outside. So you see how going towards a higher frequency is ultimately a way of embodying a more peaceful state, a lesser, a colder state, in a sense. Like the warmer light is the red, and the colder light is the blue, the ultraviolet light. So colder just means that it's lesser energetic, more focused, and more in line and more aligned. So we all need to really release all that doesn't serve us and find our purpose. And in order for us to do that, we need to understand what makes us joyful. But at the same time, in order for us to understand what makes us joyful, we need to get rid of our epigenetic signature. We need to get rid of other things. And I have interviewed also Patti Quesada, that she is going to talk about also a specific meditation. It is about deleting, like Korean meditation. It is about deleting things that happen to you daily, or that happen to you throughout time. And I'm going to post the episode also in a couple of weeks as well. So there are meditations that allow you to delete all the trauma, all the negative things that happen to you, all the indoctrinations, all the things the messages that you receive that you don't realize are actually making you drift, not making you be aligned, and because of that, they're becoming toxic. And so there are ways of deleting mentally all your epigenetic signature through meditation. And there are also ways of doing that through psychotherapies, through hypnotherapy. Hypnotherapy is a great way also of getting rid of things. You gotta be careful with hypnotherapy, in the sense that you want to be always in control of understanding what kind of buttons you're touching in your subconscious. So it's not something to use lightly. You want to make sure that it's not something that you're so deep into your subconscious that you don't even remember what you have changed. Because sometimes, everything is an equation. You want to make sure that you do things properly. So make sure that you go to a professional for this. But in general, hypnotherapy is also a great way of getting rid of things that don't serve us anymore. And this includes addictions, for example, addictions to smoke, to nicotine, to drugs or any kind of substance, or even habits that don't serve us anymore, or relationships that don't serve us anymore. And once you do that, then you can start from a clean slate and ask yourself, okay, what do I want to do next? Like what makes me joyful next? And if you're present to yourself, this is the only thing you actually have to do, to be in the here and now and to decide every second what makes you joyful. And if you decide what makes you joyful and you choose that, 100% you're having your function in the world. 100% you're on your path. I feel like a lot of times we get lost and we start asking God for guidance and we start asking for divine help to light our path. Reality is that we only need to be in the present and ask ourselves, what makes me joyful? And what makes you joyful is very different than what makes me joyful. I always like to give people the example of the lions and the gazelles, what makes a lion happy and joyful is very different than what makes a gazelle joyful, right? They get joy from two different things, but by doing that, they have their function, because the gazelles are beautiful and they run free and eat the grass. But if the gazelles become too many, they're gonna eat all the grass. And if they eat all the grass, because nobody is stopping them from doing that, after a while they're gonna limit their own growth and their own life. Because if they eat all the grass at a rate that is higher than the rate at which the grass is growing, then after a while they're not gonna have any food. And so lions have the purpose of preventing the gazelles from trespassing their lane, so that the lane of the grass and the lane of the gazelles is aligned and has the same pace of growth. And so what makes a lion joyful is chasing the gazelles and eating the gazelles. What makes a gazelle joyful is eating the grass. So you see, like, these two things are completely different and completely opposite, but there is no good or bad. Like, they have to have their own function, and as long as they maintain their lane, that's fine. Now imagine that instead suddenly lions start developing ways to build traps for gazelles. And so instead of eating the gazelles that they need to eat and they're supposed to eat in order to keep the number of the gazelles constant, in a sense, or like keep the number of the gazelles to a certain number, so that they have enough food, the grass is growing at the right rate, they're growing at the right rate, and the lions are growing at the right rate. If suddenly the lions start developing traps that entrap the gazelles, even if they're not supposed to be eaten, and start eating too many gazelles, after a while, this is trespassing, and something else is going to happen, that the lions are going to become too many, and by doing so, they're going to trespass in the area of humans. And when they do that, then humans start hunting lions. So you see that everything is a frequency in a spectrum of things, and as long as we keep our lane and we do what we're supposed to do, and we do what makes us joyful, not sadistic but just joyful, we're fine. As soon as we trespass, then something is gonna come and block us from trespassing. And so we need to be just joyful and to not trespass, and to keep our lane from being trespassed by others. So to keep others out, so that we can have our own frequency, and we can shine our own light in the world, and we can have our own function, and the universe can enjoy our function, and humanity can enjoy our function, because we all, it's same thing as in the body. If suddenly you don't have a liver anymore, you're gonna miss it, So we need everything that is in our body, and that's why I get mad when the doctors tell, some of my clients are like, yeah, I had my gallbladder removed because my doctor told me that I don't need it. This is blasphemy. Like, you need every single piece of your body, everything is a function, and you're like, but we have mosquitoes, we have flies, do we need them? Yes, we do. They also allow us to keep our lane. How? Now imagine you're in a forest, or you are like at the very beginning of humanity, and you have to create a camp somewhere, or even now, like if you're going camping and suddenly you see a lot of flies in a place, are you gonna build your camp there? No, because if there are a lot of flies, it's because probably there is a corpse, there is a cadaver, there is something that is decomposing, something bad is happening. And so they're like a bad omen in a sense. Like so flies tell you where you should not go. And so you see that you're still, they allow you to keep your own lane, to not trespass, because if there is a cadaver somewhere, maybe it's because there are predators around. If there are predators, you're trespassing their territory. If you didn't trespass their territory, then you can get eaten as well. So you can get killed as well. So you see how everything has its own function. Everything is its own function. It's an ecosystem. I feel like we are told that the ecosystem is like a pyramid, right? But it's really not a pyramid. It's more of a spectrum where everything is the function of keeping the lane, the borders of its own lane intact, because its own function is needed in the world. And that's why we all need to do that. This is something that is not just needed for us. Finding our purpose and cleansing and doing all the things that I talked about today are not needed because you want to be a better person or you want to heal. These are things that are needed for humanity. You need to heal yourself for humanity, because you need to embody your function. The body of humanity needs you. The body of the universe needs you. God needs you to have your own function, to have your own purpose, to embody yourself with confidence, and to shine your light, and to do whatever you're good at, whatever you're meant to do for humanity. Just do that. Sometimes people, I feel like there is a lot of again, in an egoic society in which resources are being drained towards the tumor to make us embody functions that are really not our functions, that are just meant, job titles and all these things. In such a society, we're told to give more importance to certain jobs, and instead that's the opposite. Like whenever you see that in a society, you are told that certain jobs are more important than others, or more deserving of respect than others. That's not humanity anymore. That's the tumor. That's already the tumor. Nobody in humanity is unnecessary. Every single purpose is necessary in a body. Every single function is necessary in a body. What is necessary in a tumor, however, is very different, because in a tumor, what is needed is simply people who drain resources. And so a tumor values people who trespass lanes. A tumor values people who drain others' resources. A tumor values people who place barriers that are one-sided and create these semi-permeable barriers, such as call centers. A tumor values people that are sadistic against others and don't allow others to have their right respected. So all the rules are opposite in the tumor as compared to the body. But the universe allows that because there are degrees of freedom. But if the tumors grow too much, then it kills the body it belongs to. And so ultimately, the tumor dies too. And so when the tumor trespasses the size that is allowed to have, then the tumor dies. There is a counter response. And the counter response is you going through chemotherapy or to a surgeon to have a tumor removed. Like, we do these things because the tumor has transpassed the size that is allowed to have to survive, because we constantly develop tumorigenic cells every day, but they are short-lived. They can have a very short lifespan. If they have a short lifespan and they don't mess up anything, they're okay. They can survive. As soon as they start trespassing into our lane, into the body lane, then they become toxic and they are trespassing and they get removed. Or they get removed and killed, or they kill the body they belong to, and so they get removed and killed from humanity anyways. So you see how everything is really about keeping your lane. So what's your purpose ultimately is to keep your lane. To keep your lane, not just in the sense of making sure that you safeguard your lane, but to really make sure that you're embodying your own purpose, that you're embodying your own skills, and not the skills that a company values, but the skills that you really have for humanity. Again, ask yourself what makes me joyful, but always in the context of what is that actually is allowed to make everything good for everybody, to make the world a better place, to keep humanity safe, to give to others, to have a world where everybody can be wealthy and abundant and joyful. This is the same thing, like as much as you are supposed to be joyful, everybody has to be joyful. So as long as you use your skills with the purpose of making other people joyful too, then you have, a purpose, and you have a purpose for humanity, and that's your purpose. As soon as you start doing that for your own good against others, that's not the body anymore. You're already not doing your purpose. You're not embodying your purpose anymore. So finding your purpose has to do not just with finding what makes you joyful in general. Actually, it does, in the sense that, but at the very beginning, it's kind of difficult to distinguish between joy and pleasure. There are a lot of ways of feeling pleasure, but joy is a very pure form of pleasure. It's really like the joy of a kid that is really, ecstatic and just, joy. Joy is a very specific feeling that a lot of people distance themselves from after their childhood, because again, in a society that doesn't function with joy, that doesn't want for you to have your own function, but it tries to constantly make you drift and to constantly redirect your resources and your skills towards something that is not meant for humanity. In that kind of case, joy is a problem, and that's why we live in a world that gives us surrogate of joy, like alcohol, drugs, things like that, euphoria, that's not joy. Joy is a very specific feeling, and you can see joy when you go to a church, like people that go to church and that sing gospel and all these kind of things. That's joy, because churches are the body. Churches are part of the body. And not everybody that goes to church is joyful. There are people who just go because it's another reference model, it's another form of ego. But you can find way more people who are joyful in church than in a corporation, that for sure. So that's just the innocent joy that is just like independent from anybody else, and it comes from inside, from within, not from what you have or what you think you're supposed to achieve. Just it comes from you, from the inside of your heart. That's joy. Once you find that feeling, just follow it, keep following it, keep trying to tune yourself on that specific frequency, on this frequency of joy every time. And every time you make a choice, ask yourself, kind of, assess what kind of choice will give you the actual joy, which is a very specific feeling, and try to find it. And once you find it, just stick with it. And every time you have to branch out and make other choices, do the same thing and ask yourself, what is going to bring me joy? And this is for everything. And if you do that, you're inevitably going to be just aligning with your purpose in every possible kinds of ways and keeping your lane, because nothing brings you joy if people trespass your lane and don't allow you to exist. That's why we feel resentful when people abuse us, when people are trespassing and taking too much, and we feel bad, we feel resentful, and we also feel guilty for allowing that to happen to us. All those feelings are ultimately part of us, as we are built to keep our lane. And so whenever you feel negative feelings towards something, such as someone taking advantage of your kindness, or someone, doing something unjust, and it can be something that is done to you, or something you're observing, you're witnessing, or you're hearing about, someone is talking about something. So if you observe or feel something that makes you, or receive something that makes you feel shameful, guilty, or whatever negative feeling, or angry, or resentful, those feelings are usually come from something that also has to do with you not being keeping your lane. You're not keeping your lane in some way. And sometimes you're so far away from your own purpose, from your own lane, that those things can be very, very remote anyways from your actual function. So you have to go through a lot of different layers of healing and understanding and unraveling and detoxifying, and a lot of different levels of that, in order to finally find your purpose, finally find your what makes you joyful. And so sometimes those things are related to trauma, to things, but that still is part of the work you need to do to be able to tune back on the joy, the joyful feeling. Tune back. And this comes again to, like, I feel like it's easier for most people to go back to joy by thinking about their childhood, thinking about what will make you joyful when you were a child. A lot of times what will make you joyful as a child is what is ultimately your purpose in the world, and what makes you joyful as an adult. It's just that you have to make it a little different, like to change into the adult version of you. But still, a lot of people do the same things. Like as a child, I used to cook, I used to draw, and I used to be a leader for others, and I used to be a healer, and I used to be a scientist. I used to do all of these things as a child already. I used to study animals. I used to study the cards of all the different animals and all different ecosystems. I used to do all the things that I do today, that I've done in my life, that bring me joy. I used to do those things as a child already, and they brought me a lot of joy. So this is just, once you find those things that you enjoy doing, that's really the way in which you're supposed to embody your purpose, your purpose in the world as an adult. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I really feel like it's a key, really milestone in our journey to find our purpose. And it's something that oftentimes sounds very remote and sounds very difficult to achieve, or you don't even know where to start from. Most people don't even know where to start from to find their purpose. It's like such a huge topic, but it's really not. It's really about being joyful. It's just that sometimes we're so far away from it, so far away from joy. We have left behind joy so long ago that then remembering about it, it's just, we don't even remember how it feels like. It takes a lot of time to get rid of all the things we have put on top. When people are very grumpy, right? People are very grumpy are people whose whole body and brain has adapted step after step to lack of joy. And so now their whole body becomes a whole barrier for them to re-embody joy. And so part of finding your purpose, this is my 360 holistic method that is a 360. You cannot possibly embody your purpose if your body has a different purpose. If you've been trained to keep your shoulders in a certain way, you're to stay straight, or to walk in a certain way, or to do certain things, you have trained your body to embody a different function, but that's not your function. It's like you can't possibly, in a body, every cell is born with a function. We are born with a certain genetic imprinting and epigenetic imprinting. And yes, we can change ourselves a little bit, but ultimately what really makes us joyful is when we align with what we're born to be, So the same as the cells in your body. You can take a cell from your body and in vitro do experiments and make it become a multipotent stem cell. You can do that, and then you can retransform that into an organoid that you take a cell from the liver and you make it become a cell of the brain. You can do that. There are protocols to do that in vitro, and you can recreate an organ on a chip. You can do that. But that cell is not going to be joyful because it's actually not itself. Is not its whole real purpose, and in fact is not part of a body anymore. Is in an incubator in some lab, So to actually be joyful, you need to get rid of all of this indoctrination, of all of this programming, and to do that, you need to start from just taking the decision, taking the choice making the choice of just going no contact with all the things that make you be something that you're like not supposed to be. And how do you know that you're not embodying your purpose? Because you don't feel joyful. You're not feeling joyful. You feel like you don't have a purpose. People feel purposeless. People feel lost. People feel disoriented. People feel under stress. And that's because they're not embodying their purpose in the world. And so once you do that, once you realize that you have a lack of purpose, then you need to change that. You need to go back to your purpose. And if you need that, if you need help, let me know. You can find me at 360holisticcoach.com. And I use my 360 holistic method to help people find their purpose and get rid of all of the programming from a psychological, physiological, genetic, epigenetic kind of standpoint, and really go back to themselves. And so I hope you enjoyed this episode, because I really loved it. I feel like it was really an important milestone for this podcast and for your growth. And it was an important topic to talk about in the divine sense of it as well, because this is still God's truth is the name of this season. And so divinely speaking, we do have to embody our function. I feel like we don't understand how important it is that we embody our function, and that we do that intentionally and with confidence, but also forcefully, in a sense. A lot of people who trespass your lane are going to do that all the time. It is up to you to understand that they are going against the divine order of things, and that you have to keep your lane clear for you to be able to shine, because they're becoming toxic to you, and they're becoming toxic to God. They're becoming toxic to everything. I feel like a lot of times we have this idea that everything is happening as it's supposed to happen. It's not true. There are levels in which things happen sometimes, that, again, tumors, for example, that are not supposed to happen. They're trespassing because the universe allows a certain degrees of freedom, and we're not in a universe that is always the same and is going in the same direction as in the past. The universe has a direction, and that's why we cannot go back in time. We cannot go back in time because the only thing that is happening to the universe, and it is expanding, but is ultimately meant to go away from the trauma of the Big Bang and back and towards awakening and consciousness and peace and light and coldness. In a sense, we are going towards a colder universe. Frequencies that are more peaceful, frequencies that are more lesser energetic, lesser traumatic, lesser trespassing all the time, more aligned. We're going towards that. And so it is not true that there is nothing that we don't want for it to happen. There are things that are unsustainable and they're not supposed to happen. So when people trespass your lane too much and you don't feel good about it, you should just put boundaries and put them back in their lane, and make sure that they keep staying in their lane, or that someone takes care of them, because there is a divine order of things, and there is a divine direction towards which the universe is going, and it's not the same as in the past. So we need to go towards something better and more light and more bright and more peaceful and more loving. That's what we need to do, and heal. We need to heal. And so anything that keeps causing wounds is not healing. So we need to heal, and to do that we need to keep our lane and have our own function. And if we all have our function, and if we all make sure that we have a function for the body that makes us joyful in a context of bringing joy to everybody else, and so our values are important, then we're gonna be just being in our lane and receive abundance from all possible kinds of sides, because that's how the universe works. We're just being aligned. So hope you guys enjoyed it. And again, find me at 360holisticcoach.com or on my Instagram at 360holistic.coach. And let me know what you think. Write in the comment section. put on the notification, turn on the notifications for this podcast. Follow, share, help me share this beautiful podcast with everybody. And thank you so much. And thank you, Zula Den.